Welcome to the Tea Grannies. I'm Elise.
And I'm Maria. Today we're here to chat about story building, so pour yourself a cup of tea and let's get started.
Dozens of sweat-slicked bodies fill the sandy beach, twirling and touching under the glow of crisscrossing fairy lights. Palm trees line the jagged edge where sand meets jungle, standing crooked from years of braving summer storms. Though the night air is heavy with moisture, the sky is clear. Stars litter the space overhead, shimmering off the equally dark sea. A raging bonfire sits at the center of the revelry, on pale sand, bathing those who dance around it in a warm hue. Off to the side, closer to the dense forest than the water, I watch from an enclosed, ruby-colored tent as bodies squirm and tune to the rhythmic drums and string instruments. Squeals and chatter battle with the music, filling the air. Some folks wear the finest garments they own, silk slacks or breezy gossamer skirts in every shade imaginable, but the majority wear only their skin. Tonight's bacchanal is especially rambunctious. The pleasant weather allows for celebrating on the beach rather than in the palace, like we've been limited to in the weeks past, and the joy is contagious. I fan myself with one hand, lifting a heavy curtain of midnight hair off my neck with the other. I don't know how they stand to have a fire in this heat, Alona says, her freckled face moist from humidity. She pulls her fiery red curls off her shoulders, tying them with a strip of cloth. It's all about atmosphere, I say, reciting my mother's words with an eye roll. We both chuckle.
So overall, I thought this was a really lovely piece. The descriptions are beautiful and they really set the scene. I would suggest moving one or two of the sentences from the first paragraph into the second, so we meet our main characters a little earlier, but we still get all that awesome world building. I thought the details were perfect, the night air being heavy with moisture, the bonfire, and the color contrasts. And we get a clear physical picture of Alona. Am I saying that right? I think it was Alona.
I think so.
But not so much of the main character. So we also don't get her name, which, I mean, I can't say that's a must-have on the first page. Like, I'm trying to think of books where you get their name on the first page and nothing is coming to me. But most readers will have like a back cover copy and they'll, they read the synopsis so they'll know what the main character's name is. It just seems a little, I feel like we're missing it, maybe just because of the context and that we're reading these. So there is that. But yeah, I mean, overall, I thought this was really great. And I will let Elise get to her slightly more detailed comments.
Yeah, so when I read these, I try to read them without reading your comments. I just read it and then I think, okay, what do I want to say? And then after I've put in my highlights, I then go and look at what you've said and see if I want to touch on anything. So I was reading through your overall stuff and it's like, yeah, yes, on all accounts, the visuals in this piece are just delicious. They're gorgeous. I have such a vivid picture and feel for the opening setting of the story. So like for setting the stage, this is brilliant. And then all the way through, the descriptions are just delightful and not overdone. I didn't feel like they went too far, but just enough to paint this picture, the perfect picture that I need. And then I loved the brief character descriptions we're getting right before the page ends. And yeah, maybe we need a character name for the main character. That should come in pretty quick there. Even if it's on the back cover, I feel like if you can work it into the story somehow in a natural way, that can help just establish this more of a connection. But then, yeah, other than that, I just had a lot of curiosity about a few small things that I think will become very important later. And so I was left with some questions and just wanting to read more, which is exactly what you want, which is brilliant. But the first one, there's a line in there about the parties having been limited to the palace until this moment. Why? Why couldn't they have their parties on the beach up until now? I think
parties are way better.
Right? So
yeah.
I feel like this might be some very important information that we just don't understand the relevance of yet, which is fine. Like, I like how it's set up that way, but I was just very curious and would hope that information might start to be delivered in the next couple pages. The second one is, who is the main character, and what is their relationship to Alona? How do they know each other? Why are they hiding in a tent together? Like, that whole situation is like, okay, they're watching the party, but they're not participating.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? I was very curious about that. And then my third one, and yeah, you might get the giggles here a little bit. We'll try and keep this calm, but please tell me because I need to know. And you can respond to my comment, the author, if you feel up for it, and tell me directly if you want. But is this party an actual orgy or are people just kind of drunk? Because I had to look up the definition for the word bacchanal, and it could go either way. You know, it's a toss-up. It could be one, it could be the other, and I just really feel that needs some clarification. Maybe not in this first opening page, but in the next page, we should know whether it's one or the other. I think that's fairly crucial information.
And I like how when I read it, I was like, oh, it's a party. And then I saw Elise's comment. I'm like, orgy? Did we read the same piece? And I went back and saw it. And then, anyway, and then I was looking at the beginning of the piece, and then the sweat-slicked skin, and I was like, oh, maybe it is an orgy.
And people are just wearing their skin. So, you know, it could go either way. So, yeah, we're having a good laugh about that. You know my background from the romance episodes and things we've talked about before. So
the irony is that you noticed that and I didn't.
I know. I think that's hilarious. But it's only because I looked up the word. If I hadn't looked up the word, it wouldn't have caught on for me.
Like,
but I was like, I don't know that word. I think I know what they're trying to say by that word. But these other details, I'm not so sure. So I looked it up and I was like, there it is. The orgy. There it is. So yes, I'd really like to know. And I think in the next couple of, like, either in this page or the next, it should be made clear to the reader because I think that's a really important distinction. And it sets the tone very differently one way or the other. So yeah. And then other than that, I'm also not really sure what direction this piece is going, what genre it is going to be. That information might be covered on the back cover copy with the cover art and everything. That might be enough to guide me, which is great. But at this point, I don't have any major critiques for this submission. Like, it's very polished, and I just want to know. I want more information, basically. I'm curious about all these things. And I would be happy to read further to find that out. It's very, very beautifully written. But yeah, I have these questions, and I don't have a whole lot of clarity yet, so.
And this particular writer has a book coming out.
Ooh.
I can't remember when it comes out, but I know it's coming out
exciting
in 2022.
Exciting.
And I believe it's this story that we just
okay, so I can find out more. Good.
So you can find out more, and we'll end up reading it and putting it up on our Instagram page where we do all our reviews. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh yeah, can't wait. This fairy is being a pain in my ass. We've been stuck inside these concrete walls for hours, and she's still playing the innocent act that I've seen through since the beginning. The big blue watery eyes don't fool me. I know she killed my victim. Please don't make me tell it again, she begs. Her already tiny frame looks even smaller, seated behind the large metal table between us. Her long pink hair has fallen over her face, but I can still see the crocodile tears that she's trying to use against me. You can stop telling the story, Layla, I say to her, placing my palms on the table and leaning in close. When you stop lying. She sniffles, and it's all I can do to keep my eyes from rolling. For a moment I think I'll have to prompt her again, and then she starts to speak, her tone tinged with frustration. I was getting off work at the coffee shop when Sam texted me, asking me to come over. I walked from the coffee shop to his apartment. When I got there, I knocked, but he wouldn't answer. I tried the door, and it was unlocked, which was unusual. As soon as I walked into the apartment, she pauses and makes a sound, which almost sounds like genuine pain. I could smell the blood. I checked the living room and found his body. I wait for a second. But it seems she's ending the story there, as she has every other time I've heard her tell it. With a tense sigh, I ask, where exactly was the body located? Between the couch and the coffee table. So carefully rehearsed. Usually, if I make a suspect tell their story enough times, they slip eventually. Some minute detail doesn't add up, or changes just enough to matter. Layla, though, she's good. As much as I hate doing it, it looks like I'll have to resort to a more deceptive technique. Did you go near the body? Layla's head shoots up, and she meets my gaze, surprised by the question. I've asked her the same things over and over again for 5 hours, but this is new.
So I thought this had a great opener. The first line was awesome and definitely attention-grabbing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot I like about this piece. The biggest thing is I'm not getting enough setting or detail before the fairy starts telling her side of the story. And I think the tension could be better or just as good if the writer could build a little more anticipation before the fairy confesses. Because as much as we like to be dropped into a story, I feel a bit like I'm on chapter 2 and I'm missing something crucial.
Mm.
And I mean, the entire premise seems amazing. Like, I'm kind of picturing a good cop, bad cop fairy situation.
Yeah.
And they're questioning each other about unusual death. And there's like a lot of potential. But yeah, I just need a little bit more anticipation.
Mm. Interesting. Okay.
And my other thought was that Layla, the fairy, I feel like we could trim that confession because I don't think we need a lot of that information. Mm. So like when she starts talking about she was getting off work at the coffee shop all the way until she found the body, none of that information is actually really important to us until she is at the door trying to get in, and then she walks in and finds the body. So I think that could be trimmed, and then you could kind of build up some more tension in the first page, and then we would be, off to the races.
Yeah, you could even trim it to say, like, when I got home from work, I knocked on the door and he didn't answer. Just start from there and just shorten it that much to keep it tight, and that'll keep the reader going. We should note that it's not a confession. It's just she's kind of describing how she found the body. She's not actually confessing to murdering anybody. Important distinction. But yeah, agreeing with you 100%, the opening line is fantastic. That made me grin. That made me like, okay, we're getting into something good here.
Yeah.
And then the overall vibe, like we're getting a blend of fantasy and police procedural, and like this is 100% my guilty pleasure. This is everything I want rolled into one, and I don't usually see these two things together. So I'm very down for this. I was very down as soon as I finished the first paragraph. So I do think I agree with Maria that this story could start in a stronger place, and whether that's the main character bringing the suspect in for the first time or earlier, or even consider starting things a little bit later. Like if Layla really is going to be just a side character, basically, you could skip past the interrogation entirely and just start the story after the main character has already interrogated her and moved on from that. And maybe they're like ranting about it to one of their coworkers, but I think what we're trying to get at with these comments is that no matter where the story starts, it might be able to start in the moment that you have it. Something needs to be in place to add more tension and more stakes right off the bat. Otherwise, it feels a bit, I don't know if it's cliche or just like, this is just another police procedural. What's actually exciting about it? I think maybe that's the piece that's missing. Like we know that there's fairies, but at this point, there's been nothing to complicate the situation, even though there is that reality. So one of the things that I wondered about was the main character says that this fairy is lying to her. In other fairy stories with the Fae world, fairies can't lie.
Oh,
They're not capable of that. So my first bump was, okay, we're doing fairies, but the rules are different, which is fine. Like there's all sorts of ways to do Fae. You don't have to use all of the rules. This can be your own kind of blend of that. But the thing that I think makes Fae stories so interesting is those cultural distinctions. Like Fae can't lie, and how do you have them confessing to something that they did, or trying not to confess to something that you know they did but you need evidence of? That's what makes that whole Fae side so interesting and complicated. But if you don't have that, what do you have? What makes the Fae aspect of this story interesting in this moment? Because currently it's just like she's talking to another human. So I think that might be what's missing there. Another thing that I thought might work to add that tension here, if you don't want to reveal all the Fae stuff right off the bat, is maybe have a coworker in there with the main character, and they can do a good cop, bad cop routine. Because something that I noticed was this character is saying, like, these are crocodile tears. This person is obviously lying to me. I don't believe them at all. And I was wondering if that is where the tension is supposed to be. And if that's the case, then that needs to be more in your face, because I'm wondering if this character, the main character, is going to have to go through some kind of revelation or character development where they trust people a little more, and they're just way too hard on people. Because that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, that they're assuming that this person is lying way too quickly. And if that's it, then I would, add in another coworker to kind of emphasize that, hey, I think you're coming on a little too strong here. Let's actually listen to what this fairy has to say. But again, don't know. I'm not sure what the
Lots
intent
of potential
is. Absolutely.
Where it could go.
Absolutely. But yeah, adding that extra dynamic to make things just that much more unique, I think, is what's missing. And other than that, like, I had a few wording suggestions along the way to smooth out some sentences, but I really just loved the idea of a fairy cop mashup, and I want to read more of that. So keep going.
The other thing that I just remembered when you were talking was I did make a note where she says, "I know she killed my victim." Who is the victim? We should have a name there, even in like a police procedural. Wow, words are hard. Procedural. They would say the victim's name, often, right? Yeah. Like, because and there's usually a lot of that in like crime shows. But also we need to know, because like it's obviously going to be important who the victim is, and so we need a name or something there. But yeah, that was another thing. And just like in the first one, we don't get a main character name here, and we don't get a lot about our main character. We do get like a little, we can tell, like, obviously she's not very trusting and things like that, and she thinks this person's lying to her, this fairy's lying to her, or them. And I just needed a little more character, I think.
Sure. Yeah. That's a very fair point.
But this is like definitely going to be a really fun story.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's going to be really cool.
Absolutely. And I'll just add to the victim comment. I noticed your comment there as I was reading it. And I'm kind of two minds on that one, because with police procedurals, they do get into who the victim is and everything, but sometimes it's not until a little bit later, because if the victim is not really related to the main character, like the cop is just doing a job, they have this murder case that they have to work on. They don't know anyone personally, but this is their job, and that's why they're involved. Even adding a name or any additional detail, it's not going to give you that emotional beat that you would get if it was the main character's sister or their best friend or like their lover, right? So if there is emotional connection, then I would put that there, absolutely. If it is someone that the main character knows, and that's why they're going so hard on this case, definitely have that in that first paragraph, because that empathy is going to be right there immediately. But if it's just another victim, then I think you could get away with it as long as the name comes in. I think it does come in, because in Layla's, when she's talking about she got home, Sam texted me asking me to come over. Oh, okay. So I think that's the victim. But maybe somehow clarify that, make it a little bit more obvious. I don't know. There's options. Yeah. Depends on the intention. Again, we don't know the intention, so it's hard to say.
That is the downside of doing the first page. Again. And just the first page.
Yeah, we come full circle to that.
Yes. We should start asking for like a back cover copy and then
summary of your story and the first page. Hey, that might be good practice for people. We can critique both if we have enough time.
Yes, I love doing back cover copies. Those are fun. I mean, whenever you write yours, you send it to me and I'm like, that's like my favorite.
Yep.
Little thing.
My least favorite. We make a good team.
Yeah, it's good. We balance out each other's weak points.
One of the things that we don't get to critique on in the first pages exercise that we've started doing is overall plot, which is what we're here to talk about today, right? We don't get to see the back cover copy setting up the story for us and introducing us to the main character. We don't get to know what the whole world is kind of supposed to look like. We don't get the vibe. We just get the first page, and if we happen to get all the pieces we need to kind of feel settled, excellent. If we don't, could come later. We don't know. So all those things are really important for establishing your plot and laying out your story and knowing where you're going. So we don't have a whole lot of opportunity to dive into that. That's why we're doing an entire episode on story building. And you might find that this is a conversation where outliners get to shine. They get to like just pull out all the stops and be like, here have I got the strategy for you. Use this structure and you'll be golden. And it's just, very prescriptive, and, it's like the 5 steps to success, and it looks so easy. It looks so easy.
Only looks easy.
And then you try. And then you dive in and you actually try, and you're a pantser, and you flail around for a while, and you get into a panic because, oh God, it is not as easy as they make it look. It's like those people who are really athletic, and you're trying one of their sports for the first time, and you watch them do it. This happens at the gym all the time, because I like to watch these strong climbers climb. And they climb something, it's like, oh, they made that look really easy, really smooth. It looks like I could do that. Oh yeah, I could do that. I try to hold on to the first thing. It's like, no. Not happening. It's like, no, never. I can't even grip it.
This is me at horse shows. I'm like, oh my God, they rode that triple terribly. And then I get in there and just completely annihilate the triple. And I'm like, oh, I should not have talked. Like, it always looks a lot easier than
Absolutely.
It is.
And yeah. So that's true here. Outlining looks really like straightforward and simple, and you've got all your check boxes and you just line them up and go forward. But if that's not how you work, if that's not how your brain computes, pointing at myself here,
yeah, me too.
It's not gonna ride. It's not gonna be a smooth journey. But story building is at essence a simple concept. You have your beginning, you have your middle, and you have your end. That's true of any story worth reading. But yeah, when you try to fill in the boxes and actually write it, it starts to get a lot more complicated than that. Where is the proper place to start? How do I end this? Am I going to be ending it in a satisfying way for the reader? And you talk about audience, and it's just like, okay, there's now too many moving pieces, and it can get really overwhelming. So you may have heard outliners, bless their souls, talking about story structures like the hero's journey, the 3-act structure. There's this well-known book that I've heard lots about called Save the Cat. I have never read it. I have been told to read it numerous times. I have yet to act on it.
I haven't read any of my writing books. I've got a stack behind me, like craft books. I've never cracked one of them.
Yeah. And I think for you and I, because we're pantsers, it's harder for us to do that. And what I've found more helpful is when I'm struggling with a certain craft issue, I go and read a section on that instead of trying to read the whole book in one shot, because that's not going to be effective. But so you've heard all these structures, you've heard all these titles, and it's like, okay, there's a strategy for me in there somewhere. There's so many. And there might be. These might be exactly what you need. I don't want to dismiss that at all. But also you might need to find your own way within some of them. So I'm going to go over a few basics. I'm going to try to keep it short. Haha, she says and lies. And maybe you'll find yourself in here. But then I'm going to go over, throughout the episode, we're going to talk about what we do to make this work for us. And it's not going to look like the traditional structure. So if you're here as a pantser, if you're here as someone who just hasn't been able to fit into the outlining world, this is definitely the episode for you. If you are an outliner, but you just want to kind of explore some additional things, and maybe your old strategies aren't working as well as you want them to, you might be able to pick up some things that would be helpful. So there's probably something for everyone here. And maybe we'll get some comments that'll teach us some things about it too by the end of it. So the first one I want to talk about is one of the most popular in Western fiction, The Hero's Journey. Whenever I hear this one talked about, it's always Luke Skywalker's journey through Star Wars. And because it works, because it's very straightforward and you can see all the beats and everything. So I'm not going to go through the whole hero's journey here. You can look that up. I have Wikipedia open. Just
watch Star Wars.
Just watch Star Wars.
If you've seen Star Wars, you've seen the hero's journey.
You have.
And then they did it again in the newer in the new trilogy. So
you can look at Lord of the Rings. You can look at anything, really. We'll follow this in the Western world. I want to stress that point. This is a very Western idea of storytelling. So hero's journey, it starts with this call to adventure, some refusal of the call. Like, they use this different language to describe the different stages of the character's arc through the plot. And as I was looking this up, I noticed that the hero's journey can be slotted into the 3-act story structure. So you can use both if you really want to.
Really outlining like mad. You can do both.
Yeah. There's, like I said, there's something for everyone. There's something for the mad outliner at the very far end of the spectrum, and there's something for those people that want to toss all that out the window. Yeah. So Hero's journey is one option. The 3-act structure is another, and this is one of my favorites, and I will explain that throughout the episode why I like it, but I'll just go over it really quick. It's 3 acts, so 3 things. Act 1 is the setup. You introduce your characters and your setting, followed by your inciting incident. So whatever it is that sets the story off into the main thread of the plot. Act 2 is the bulk of the story. So Act 1 and Act 3 should be like maybe 25%, if that. Mm-hmm. And then Act 2 in the middle is like, that's everything else. And it's your character arcs that you go through. Your characters should go through the most transformation here. So if they need to change or develop in order for them to confront the main problem, that should happen in Act 2. And then you get to Act 3, and that's where you have all your rising action, your climax, your denouement, and just tying everything together and wrapping the story up. So again, both of these, the hero's journey and the 3-act structure, are very Western ideas. They're not the only options out there. The one that I pulled from Wikipedia, bless it, is Kisho Tenketsu. It's popular in classic Chinese, Korean, and Japanese narratives, and it divides the story into 4 sections. And I'm not familiar enough with it. I haven't done research to like effectively describe it and how it works, but we'll leave a link in the episode description to where you can read up more about it. You can always do your own research. We'll make sure you have the name of it so that you can find it easily, because it's, spelling is hard. And later on, maybe we can do an episode that specifically is like breaking down these structures, but that's not what this one is about. This one's more about some loose strategies and overarching stuff. So we're going to talk about some of the strategies that we use currently to do those things well.
Yeah, first I'll have my little ramble, as I do. So plot, story, same thing. Your characters drive a story, but you still need a plot for them to follow. So what can you throw at your character to make them grow? What kind of conflict can force the journey in the direction that you want it to go and you need it to go to get to the end that you want? Again, repeating myself, I feel like I say this every episode, but reading is research. Reading is research. Mm-hmm. Pick up a popular or like a well-done book in the genre that you're writing in and read it, and think about how all of those ingredients came together to create a good story. Probably have multiple romance examples. So I just find that's like the easiest one.
Well, that's fair because romance follows such a strict structure.
It follows a structure, so it's great for examples. I quite like it. So I read a book recently where 2 characters team up to deal with their toxic bosses. Ooh. So romance is obviously endgame because it was a romance, but the events that result from their self-imposed mission is what drives them to have their happy ending together. Okay. So you can't have hey, like these 2 people are really compatible. They met in this like super cute, quirky way and nothing bad ever happened. The end. That's so boring. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Just because that's how maybe you met your spouse in real life doesn't mean that's how we're going to read about it, okay? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's my little ramble about plot. And one of the other things that is important that we've touched on before in the world building episode, I think, but it's important to create like a clear time period with language and setting as well for your story, because you don't really want to like roll up to a story and it's like, this is set in France, and like all the French you used is wrong.
Oops.
or you didn't use any French at all, and like just you got to establish it, and then you got to kind of follow the rules that you just made for yourself.
Yeah, you got to build on it. Like we can make stuff up. We're in the business of doing that. But if you establish a guideline, if you establish a rule, and you don't follow it, your reader's going to notice that. They're going to be like, you established this rule and you broke it right away. I don't trust you. Because there's an element of trust between you and the narrator. And if you break that, it's like the unreliable narrator thing is really popular, right? And that can be done if done well. But that's not about breaking the rules and just not following the things that you set up and subverting expectations like that. It's you still have to work within the expectations of the reader, and that can be really tricky. But yeah, back to if you're not an outliner, have no fear. We're going to be reassuring you throughout this episode because obviously we're reassuring ourselves. Neither of us outline a thing.
This is a positive self-talk episode.
Absolutely. If the people who listen to it are us, we've done our job.
Yeah.
But I've discovered through much trial and error, and if you don't believe me about that, you can say that to my backlog of 70 story ideas that I started in high school. Trial and error, let me tell you, mostly error. While pantsing and just, winging it is super fun. It's one of my favorite ways to write. I will probably never change. It's just not practical. I think if you're a pantser, you've noticed that you end up with a bit of a mess, and then you have to do a lot of work to fix it. And so I'm not trying to say that now we need to all convert to ride or die outlining, but there are other ways to figure out your story and still use what you love about the pantsing technique, but add a little bit of structure to it, a little bit of guidance, so that when you finish that first draft, it's a little bit more usable and less of a mountain to kind of try and edit down, because I've done that and it's hard. So this is all about just like helping us make our work for us a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So I like to keep a really loose structure for my first draft. And going back to in the intro, what we were saying before, beginning, middle, and end. It is that simple at first. That's literally it. I don't add in a fancy structure. I don't look at the hero's journey. No save the cat for me. It's just me, my ideas, and the page. And then as I go, that's when I start to refine my structure. And the one that I like to use is the 3-act structure, and I'll get into why. So as a pantser, I find that it leaves a lot more wiggle room than something like the hero's journey. The hero's journey is very detailed. Like let me go back and look. There are 17 different stages. If you look at the Campbell version from 1949, but then you look at the 2007 version, they've refined it to 12. That's still a whole lot.
Yeah, I lost interest after like the third one.
Yeah, right?
I'm out.
So I like the 3-act structure because it's a lot looser. And it follows the beginning, middle, and end mindset like a lot better. So even if I plan out my 3 basic acts, like my inciting incident for Act 1, something happens to set off the plot, some of the growth things that need to happen in Act 2 to get me to the ending that I know I want to have in Act 3. That's it. That's what I plan out. And that's what helps me ensure that my first drafts are actually quite usable by the time they're done, because I haven't spent as much time just wandering. When I don't plan out my ending, I just wander because it's fun. And you get to like write all these different scenes that it's like, oh, this would be really cute, or this would be really dramatic. And you get to add in all these different things. But I found just doing it that way with no structure whatsoever, I had a whole bunch of pieces that I couldn't do anything with because they don't all fit together, because I haven't been following a joining thread. But if I have this loose structure of, okay, this is the beginning and this is the ending I need to get you. Cut out the middle piece if you want. Just take beginning and end. This is where my character starts. This is where I want them to get. This is the point of the story. And there will be other things that are just as important as that major point, but you need that major point as like the driving thing. That's what I'm shooting for. That's the point of this thing. And if I lose sight of it, people get confused. So it's really important. But it's important to me to have a lot of options and different ways of getting to that ending. Even if the ending stays the same, the way I get there is the thing that changed. And that's how I keep pantsing, even though I have a structure, because I'm not locked down to all these different elements of the first act or elements of the third act. I can do whatever I want as long as my beginning and end still connect in a way that makes sense.
I'm like listening to you talk, then I'm like, oh my God, what do I do again? So after listening to your methods, I think I'm going to coin myself as a discovery writer, because I don't go in with any of that.
Yeah.
I don't. I go in there, like I open up a blank Word doc. I'm like, I kind of had this idea for like Lady Assassins, and I think I want there to be some romance. And then I start.
Yeah, so you are, I would say, you are a true pantser in comparison to me. I used to be that way.
What has happened to me over the years, because I've had, so like we just talked about, I've had so many first drafts where I've just had to start right from scratch again for a second draft. Like there was nothing really usable in the first draft. So now the method becomes a little bit like, I chase my vibes for a while, a few chapters at least. And then I start to plot the chapter out. I don't plot any further than the chapter usually, but I will keep a separate doc with like brainstorming. So, you know, I'll plot chapter 4 and then I'll be like, hey, you know, it'd be a good midpoint thing would be if this happened. And so I'll make a little note in my brainstorming doc, like, hey, like this could happen. It's all stuff that could happen. I'm not locked in at all.
Yeah.
And then there's usually at some point in the draft, and like this is such a hard, like it's different for everyone. So it's like trying to explain how things feel. It's very difficult. There will be a point of like no return in my draft where I'm like, oh, this is the ending I'm writing to.
Yeah. Now I need to know.
Yeah. And then it has intent after that. And then when I go through and edit for a second draft, a lot of what I do is I go through the whole thing and I like make notes of what needs to happen for that ending to be really good.
Yeah.
For it to make sense. And then I start to thread that through as I go. So I feel like my editing process, I'm currently editing right now. It feels like overwhelming a little bit. I'm sure I could fine tune it, but my brain just won't cooperate to do any kind of outlining aside from like a chapter. But that's okay. I mean, you're going to fine tune stuff in the editing phase anyway. So if you kind of find yourself just chasing your story a little bit, that's okay. And first draft like that, do that. But the hard part about that is sometimes you write yourself, I say it's like writing yourself into a corner. You get to a point where you're like, I have no idea where to go. And that usually when that happens, your problem has started way before that page somewhere. It's not just on that chapter that you're having problems. That's probably, say you're having this on issue on chapter 10. The problem could be in chapter 9. The problem could be in chapter 2.
Yeah.
And that's usually when you're just drafting. That's a great place to say, from here on out, I'm doing this way, and then carry on and write your way out of that hole, write yourself back in the direction that you wanted to be in the first place. And then you can go fix that. So that was a bit of a tangent about editing, but
still fits.
still fits. So I think a lot of writers try and have the whole story arc plotted out before they begin. And like, again, if you're an outliner, That's
great.
Like, we love to hate you. Go for it. That must be nice. But for the rest of us mere mortals who cannot outline, just start writing and keep it. Like, this has been the biggest thing for me. I used to try and write everything in one document, like for some dumbass reason. Now that I have Scrivener, which I love, and no, I don't get paid to plug Scrivener, I just love it that much. I have like a separate folder, and like these are brainstormings, and then I have like edits for next draft, and then I have like character bios, and like I have all that stuff so I can flip back and forth without losing my spot in my document. And then they also have this like little sidebar where you can like type out your notes, whatever, and that's where I plot my chapter. And it's really handy. So, I mean, I like it. But yeah, just remember when you're drafting, like, you can stop anywhere in your draft and say, no, I've decided main character's profession needs to change. You're in chapter 20. That's fine. Make a big note, flag it, make a note in your edit list. Yep. And then you can fix it later. I think that a lot of us we all do this. We're like, we want our first draft to be perfect. We want it to make sense as a story. Your first draft, maybe it will make sense from beginning to end. Like, Elise sent me her first draft of her third book for the Nymph Keepers. And I was like, this is amazing. This reads like a fifth draft. And then there was me who's going to send her the draft, actually second draft of my Lady Assassin story. And I was like, oh dear, none of this. It's like 3 different stories mashed together. So I'm doing another edit.
But to be fair, like, I'm sending you the third book in a series. You're sending me a standalone. Yes, I have all the world building done. Like, I know what I'm doing. True. And I have my characters developed, right?
If you're writing a series, I think the outlining is more helpful.
Yeah, it comes in a lot more handy.
Yes.
I wish I would have outlined. Honestly, I wish I would have outlined book 1 to book 3, because now it's like, I'm probably missing some inconsistencies that I'm just not aware of because I didn't plan it out. But
I obsessively read your stuff and haven't noticed it yet. So.
Okay, maybe I'm better than I thought.
Okay, you're doing well. And there we go, off on another rant about something else.
Oh yeah, it's us. I'm sure they're used to it by now.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, moving on to other things. We're getting into some tips and tricks here. So I want to, I'm trying to nail down something really practical that I can share about my process. Because a lot of the time it's just like, do these theoretical things, and theoretically that will help you do theoretically better.
Theoretically, you're going to change the theoretical vibes, theoretically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very, I don't know, it's like when you go to school for something and you get all this book knowledge, and then you go and start a job and try to apply it, and it's like, this doesn't what? I thought I knew this crap, but I don't know anything. Oh no. And then imposter syndrome and everything. So trying to get practical. One of my favorite tips, which I think I shared with Maria initially, and she's become one of the biggest advocates, and it makes me feel like a trendsetter, and I feel awesome. I'm pretty sure I got it from Eileen Cook. Probably ripped it off her. She'll forgive me. But lists. You've probably figured out that we both like lists at this point. We talk about them obsessively all the time. But I kid you not, we found ways to add lists into the writing process at all stages.
Lists.
At all stages. And it's not just checklists either. So this method for getting unstuck, or when you're trying to figure out how to move forward, even if you're not stuck, you're just like, okay, I need to write a new scene here, and I'm not sure where I want to go. The list method is my favorite for either of those scenarios. Even if I'm just working on my overall outline, or just figure out a single scene. So I'll start by making a list of options, and I say, okay, my goal is always to list up to 100 options. I want to reach 100 one day. I don't know if it'll ever happen, because my list often stops between 10 and 20 things. And I think the reason for that is the first 5 things that I list. How could this scene go? Where could I go from here? How could I move the story forward? The first 5 things are nonsensical. Monkeys drive in on a motor car. Throw that into everything. Someone finds a bomb. Throw that into everything. Someone comes in with a gun. I don't care what time period you're in. There's a gun. Time machine. We can work with it. So the first 5 are just complete bogus. The next 5 are usually more obvious options. It's like, yeah, it would naturally go here. The reader would probably predict it, and it's just going to be easy for me to take it in this direction. But it's not very exciting. And then I start listing a few more, and that's when they get fun, and that's when they get interesting. And the first 5 to 10 options are usually the practice ones. They get me warmed up for this list, and then something really great usually appears, and I have this eureka moment of, oh my God, I just figured out the biggest twist in history, and I'm going to go down for it as just the mastermind. And no, that will never happen, but it feels like it will, and it's worth it.
They are really good, though.
Thank you. So that's my tip, is list it out, and just, it's a brainstorming exercise to get kind of the crappy ideas out of the way, and then it'll warm up your brain and free you up to think about like something amazing.
Mm-hmm. And this is how I got to the end of that Greek mythology-based story that I wrote.
That
I was
makes me so happy.
Oh, I love that story. And I got there, I was like, I think I was like 3/4 of the way through. I was like, how am I going to end this? So I came up with like 3 options. And then obviously I sent them to Elise, because I'm very codependent. And she was like, this one's good. This one kind of feels like a cop-out. This one is badass. And I was like, okay, good. I'll do the badass one.
Excellent.
And it's great.
And it is badass.
It's pretty good. And so that's also where the exercise works. It doesn't have to be just for a scene. You can do this for your ending. You can do it for your middle. It's such a helpful exercise. I mean, I really love it. And my favorite one, daydreaming. That's why I came up with the podcast idea.
You're the true pantser among us.
Yes, I really am. I'm a total, I'm daydreaming about stuff, and then my brain will latch onto something and latch onto something else, and that's usually how almost all my ideas come. Yes.
That's why you message me all the time, like, hey, I just thought of this thing, and you're actually doing that. I don't work that way. I have to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to think about this thing now. And then I find an idea. But you're just like, eureka. You have those all the time. It makes me really jealous.
But then I get really sad when I'm not getting that.
Oh,
so we'll get into my next
There's a dark
thing,
side.
My actual sort of plan for your daydreaming. I mean, I'm sure if you're at school, whatever, but I usually like to do it when I'm not going to be interrupted, or I'm not required to be on a phone call or something. That's a bad time to daydream, because you'll just think of something good and someone's asking you something, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, and then you'll forget about it.
Yeah, so I like to do it. I have dogs, so I go walking every morning. So a lot of the time when I'm walking, I will sort of start thinking about what I'm working on right now, or what I'm going to work on next, and that's usually pretty helpful for me to like get myself in the mindset to write, for one thing, and to help me find like the holes in my story. That seems to be when I fix most of them. So you'll see me walking dogs and then I just stop abruptly and type like 2 paragraphs into my phone and then I keep going. That's because brainstorming while I'm walking.
Awesome.
It's good to do when you're driving, as long as you can do it safely, obviously. And the way it works for me, I usually put on like relaxing music, whatever that is for you. I mean, for me, I've been really into like classical lately, just very relaxing, no words. So like my brain can really wander. And I kind of daydream about my story like as if it were a movie. Like, what would it look like if it were a movie? And that really helps me with world building, for sure. Helps me with character, like facial expressions and tone and stuff, like really as vivid as I can. The daydreaming exercise, I mean, I feel like we get told not to daydream and stuff when you're a kid, like pay attention. It's actually like such a great thing for you to do for yourself and for your brain. So
relearn how to daydream.
Permission to daydream. And the other thing that I find very helpful is refill that creative well, which we have talked about before. And that works for when you're drafting and stuff too. So do things that inspire your writing. So like watch movies that you love that inspire you. If you're writing like a Regency fantasy, then okay, you can watch some, period dramas or whatever. Make a mood board on Pinterest. That's actually been really fun. And we went and shared on mood boards and I'm like, they're out of control. We're like 200 pins. Because we can see it. I'm like, oh, at least we'll agree that this is good. Pin. TikTok. Rather book talk. That's great because there's lots of recommendations. There's ideas. One of my favorite things I see is people will do like, they'll do mood boards for their stories or they'll do it for books that they're trying to get you to read. And it'll have like music and like all these images. And it's just great inspiration. And don't stop consuming stories just because you're drafting. So I have trouble reading a lot when I'm drafting, I think, because I can only focus on certain things when I'm drafting. I get kind of in a mode. But that's okay. You still need to take some brain break time, and that's a good time to watch like movies, TV shows, or like read a book that almost by heart, like a comfort read kind of thing. Like I said, inspiration can come from anywhere. Like you could be like, a lot of people get it in the shower because you're in there with no distractions, no phone, nothing. And that's usually when you start thinking about your story. So basically the takeaway is slack off and daydream and listen to some classical music.
And then make some lists and you're good to go.
Make some lists and you're good to go. That's all you need to know to be a writer, obviously.
Oh, man. I think this leads pretty well into one of my favorite quotes, and it's by Neil Gaiman. And I've often heard writers just repeat this one, that the second draft is where you go after you gather together the fragments of the first draft and figure out what it is you did and make it look like that was what you always meant to do. So I take that as first draft is freedom. First draft, especially if you're a pantser, you should just play. You're just having the time of your life because you can do whatever the hell you want. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. It doesn't matter if it fits together from beginning to end. If you want to take Maria's words, like it's for your eyes only. You don't have to share it with anybody. I like to work that way, that I don't share my first draft until I've had a look at it as a complete set and made some changes to make it make sense. And that's when I send it out to my beta readers. And it can be absolutely nonsensical. It's like you're building a puzzle and you're putting the pieces together wrong and you don't care. That's okay. You haven't found the whole picture yet, but you'll get there. And where you'll start to get there is in draft 2. That's where you start to pick it apart and make it make sense. That's what Neil Gaiman is saying. That's where you add foreshadowing and your crazy twists that you can build up to and the information that you had before, but now you want to introduce it at a different stage so that you can keep it a secret longer or shorter and just change the pacing to make it make more sense. Deciding all of that in the first draft is going to be basically impossible. Like you're never going to finish because you're always going to be stuck on trying to know everything, but you don't know anything yet because it's not done. And I'm getting really intense about this because this is my favorite thing to talk about. And just if every writer could figure this out really quickly, they would just improve miles and miles faster than we have to all kind of slog through and figure it out slowly, right? Draft 2 isn't even for expanding what's not clear enough or cutting back what's overdone. That's like draft 3 or 4 problem. Draft 2 is for deciding pacing and how the plot intertwines with the subplots and the character arcs and the relationships, how that all fits together. And yeah, I think that's why I honestly find it useless to create a hyper-specific outline for my first draft. Like, it just doesn't work for me. I don't know enough at that point about the characters, about the story to start that way. I have to figure it out as I go along. And I function best when I have a really loose structure and a lot of leeway. And I just want to emphasize, outliners may not be able to function that way. And that is okay. If you need a strict schedule and a strict outline in order to move forward, that's how you work. And that's amazing. Like, I know a couple outliners that are super intense about their outlines, and I've looked at them as like, I wish I could do that. I feel like that would like make my life so much better, but it doesn't work for me. So yeah, don't feel like you have to get pigeonholed into one way of doing things.
Exactly. And the other thing, when you're building your plot and everything like that, and this is where multiple drafts come into play. You're creating layers on layers on layers. Draft 1 is layer 1. Draft 2 is layer 2. Draft 3 is layer 3. And like you're building a cake or whatever.
Layers donkey. It's an onion.
Yeah, exactly. And like Lisa said this before on the show, and I love this advice. It's great. The scene should always be doing more than one thing. And that is a little touch, slightly super overwhelming if you're trying to do that in your first draft. So just let that shit go. You're going to do all that in your second draft. And then when you're editing, you can be like, what can I add here? So like, here's a little example. That's actually not a romance example. So everybody, 3 cheers for me. Your characters are literally gearing up for battle, putting on their, I don't know, armor parts. You know what I mean? Swords, shit, whatever. Great place to add in a little conversation with their friend, which, you know, they're worried about the battle. They're scared. They're ready to go like mess shit up. So that's giving depth to the scene. And it's upping the stakes as well because it's giving us that emotional context. And then you could add in maybe the weather changes too. And now they've got to deal with like mud and rain. And like those are all different layers. When you write your first draft, they could literally just get ready for battle. Then when you write your second draft, you're like, hey, I'm going to throw in a little chat with a friend. I'm going to throw in a little weather. Next thing you know, that scene has really come alive and it feels very intense now. But you couldn't do that in your first draft. You know, maybe that character gets killed off earlier. Like you just haven't decided yet. So again, coming back to my romance example, you got one. That's not a romance example. There's always a main plot thread, which is the romance in a romance novel. And there's always a secondary plot thread where like the main character is trying to like get a promotion at work or like heal her relationship with her mom or like whatever the secondary plot is. And you can run those two parallel to each other until they intersect near the end. So you can write your entire first draft with the single plot thread if you want. Like that's kind of what I do. That's why my first drafts are like 50,000 words or less. I just write very single-minded in the first draft. And then I go back in and then I'm like, okay, what's my other plot going to be here? And then I layer it in. And then it's a much more like it's a feedback I got on my pages recently was that sounds like a very layered story. And I was like, oh, that's good because I sure as shit did not think it was. But that was just an example of like, my editing is working because I'm getting that done.
Yeah. And it can be so easy to hear all of this and try and think about it all and just stop yourself before you even get started because there's so like, this is what we're saying. There's so many moving pieces. Don't try to bring them all together. And whether you get stalled because you're trying to outline and the story just isn't coming to you, or you're writing a scene and it just doesn't fit into the outline that you did have, now you don't know what to do. I think it's easiest to get bogged down by this in the first draft because once you have the draft, you can spend time on plot holes. You can problem solve and fix things. But until you have all of the pieces together, you can't patch any holes because the structure isn't even put together. Like if it's IKEA furniture, you just have all the stuff and the instructions and you haven't put it together yet. So stop patching holes. Stop doing that.
Don't create problems where there are none.
Yeah, exactly. And This is why I kind of harp on not copy editing your first chapter until you've written the entire story, because you might decide that chapter 1, draft 1, doesn't fit with chapter 31 in draft 1, and you might cut chapter 1 altogether or just completely change it. Don't waste your time editing small things that might just get axed. Finish the story first. That's your priority. Then fix the structure. Then you can worry about sentences and grammar and all that ugly stuff.
Yeah, that always comes last.
Yep.
Like way last.
Way last.
Otherwise, it's just extra work. You want to avoid that extra work. So, yeah, it's one of those. I mean, I'm really good at this, the whole imposter syndrome thing and anxiety. They're really super fun qualities to have when you're trying to write a story, because I will kind of hem and haw about what I'm going to do next. I'm like, oh, is that going to be a good choice? Well, now I'm just like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to go. Just going to go for it. I don't care if it's a good choice. I'm going to write. If this scene is not coming to me, I'm going to make a note. Fill in a scene where main character does something cool. I've literally written that. Although I usually write main character does something badass or whatever.
Yeah.
Main character does something sexy with the love interest. I will do that. And then I will just
move on.
Go on.
Yep.
Move forward.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, maybe if it's a pivotal moment in your story, maybe you got to do Elise's exercise where you write down a bunch of options and you decide which way to go. And honestly, sometimes you just need to walk away from your draft for a couple days and try and brainstorm it out.
Yep.
Like without forcing it. I think it's the thing I should get to about the daydreaming, brainstorming thing. It's pretty hard to force it. Yeah. Another thing that sometimes helps is write a scene from a different character's perspective, even if it's not a point of view character. So like write one from a side character's point of view.
Yeah.
It can really just help give you the clear picture that you're searching for.
Yep.
And then, yeah, you're not going to include it because they're not a point of view character. That's fine.
That's fine.
But it will probably help you get unstuck.
Yeah.
And it might help you figure out whatever else you need for your story. If you're not an outliner like me, this is a very great exercise.
Yeah.
It works really well for me. And as for like getting your plot strong, do your first draft, do your edits, send out to your beta readers, and just let them tell you what worked and what didn't work, because you get so close to your own work, you cannot frickin' tell. You cannot tell.
Oh my goodness.
And,
I'm sitting on your feedback for book 3 of the Nymph Keepers, and I send it to you like, this is a piece of trash. This is a flaming pile of garbage that will never be usable. I have to restart. They're gonna send me back my feedback. I'm gonna have to rewrite it all from the beginning, from scratch, and I'm never gonna get it published because it's gonna take forever. And then Maria sends back her comments and is like, this is hands down the best thing you've ever written.
Yeah.
I'm a god. I'm a goddess. I'm winning this day.
You are a queen and we all bow down.
I should just press publish and not even bother with the editing. No, don't do that. Bad. Elise.
We don't get too excited. But that's one of those things where you get so wrapped up in your story that it's sometimes hard. You're like, this is stupid. This doesn't work. This whole side plot doesn't work. And then you're going to give it to your beta readers and you're like, this is genius.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be like, this is stupid.
They might.
That is a risk that you take.
Absolutely. But let them tell you that first.
Exactly. And that's the tea on story building and our last episode of season 2. So thank you so much to our listeners and our submitters, as well as my wonderful friend Michael, who provided the music for our show. If you want to hear more from him, and you should, he is so talented, you can follow him on Instagram at Michael Fabro. To keep up to date with our plans for season 3, follow us on Instagram at the Tea Grannies Podcast and on Twitter at the Tea Grannies. Happy writing.